Hello, and welcome to this webinar on feed health and advanced feed management. My name is Kat, and today I'll be talking to you about product data optimization, feed management, give you a little demo on Google Merchant Center, and also show you how you can use feed rules to change product data directly in Google Merchant Center. So the last part of the session, you'll actually get to see how to add these rules, make these changes, preview these changes, and set them live in your Google Merchant Center. But first off, I'd like to start with product data optimization and important attributes that you should take a look at. You'll see important attributes on this slide that are really essential for high quality product data and performance are unique product identifiers, product content such as title and image link, and pricing, that's price and sale price and shipping as well. When it comes to brand and GTIN, these are important unique product identifiers that you'll need to provide because these identifiers are used to match against Google's product catalog to ensure product validity. Product content such as titles and images are required for search relevance and accurate content. And pricing is very important to show the shoppers that are interested in your product the right purchase information. When you're looking at these attributes, focus any optimizations that you're looking at on your priority products. Obviously, it's recommended to have these optimizations in place for all products, but focus definitely on your priority products. If you provide these unique product identifiers, if you can provide GTIN and brand for the products in your product feed, please do so. You'll see on this slide, they're very, very important for relevance. You can see your ads appear more often. Performance by providing these product details can improve, and you'll also qualify with these unique product identifiers for new ad formats and get additional reporting. So if you can, please always provide GTIN and brand attributes. When it comes to titles, titles can be made relevant to what users are searching for. So make sure they are unique. Avoid vague and unclear titles. Include relevant characteristics and attributes such as color values, size types or size. Add important attributes in the beginning. So if you do have, for example, fashion items with a specific size type, do add these at the beginning of the title, especially if it's not immediately visible from the image, what kind of size type these products might have. Add strong brands to titles, and you can also add high-value specific keywords related to what users might be searching for to the title. Always bear in mind those recommendations are based on experiments with certain merchants and certain product categories. They may not show significant uplift for all merchants and all product categories. If you have any questions, do reach out to your account manager and they'll be able to help you with further information. Title structure for different groups of products could look like this. For example, you see in the apparel category here at the top, you would look at a recommended structure of brand, gender, product type, attributes such as color, size, and material. On the right-hand side, you can see an example of how this might look like. For consumables, you look at weight and count attributes that you might add to the title, and you can see an example here on the right-hand side. Hard goods as well, there are additional attributes that we would recommend to add to the title. Electronics, as well, you can see that, as well as books, where you can add whether it's a hardcover or ebook, and adding in the author will help you structure these titles. Again, these are recommendations that are based on experiments. If you have any questions on title structure, do reach out to your account manager. These titles, when should you include brand, for example, in the title, is a frequently asked question. If it's commonly searched for by users, do add the brand into the title. If it's a short brand name, add at the beginning, and then add a brand name at the end if the product brand is identical to the retailer brand. Also, a frequently asked question is when to include color and size in the title. If you have them in the feed, we recommend to add them to the title so that you have these values available in the title as well. You don't need to normalize these colors. So you can see here an example. You don't need to normalize from brown, from walnut into brown, or from forest into green. You can leave any of these color values as is, but if you do have them, we would recommend to add them to the title as well. And then what about keywords in the title, and what are recommendations regarding keywords in the title? Only add them if they really receive a substantial amount of impressions and describe the product accurately. Remember, you want something that's relevant to users that search for the product. And you can see examples here where using sweatpants instead of comfort wear, or adding plus size, petite, maternity, personalized, and so on to the title, because they describe the product to the user and use terms that a user might be searching for. Tip, best way to proceed on this is to run some tests to see if these optimizations are working and are actually showing the performance that you're expecting, because you need to be aware that what works for one merchant or a given product category might not apply to all product categories or all merchants. Images are also an important factor. We do recommend a size of 800 to 800 pixels with a light background and minimal product staging. Please don't add any text or logos or borders to your images. Also, watermarks are not allowed, and don't include any other products that are not sold with this item in the images. Don't use generic illustrations. The image should really only show the product that the user can purchase. Also, in terms of images, what's important for apparel products: show clothing on models. If you're using a full body image, avoid cropping the model's head or feet. If you're selling one article of clothing, make sure your product is the focus of the image. If you're showing non-clothing products, such as shoes, handbags, or accessories, make sure they're alone and in the center of the main image. And don't include any product that's not sold or bundled together with the main product. Again, make sure only the product is shown in the image that's actually on sale and that the user can buy. And with that, I'd like to continue with the Google Merchant Center and feed management, and what's important to consider when you would like to use Google Merchant Center feed management to optimize your product data. The new feed experience in Google Merchant Center offers new capabilities and new features to simplify product data management. And you can see here some of the new features that have been added to Google Merchant Center. First of all, it's now possible to create product data with multiple data sources. So before, it used to be only possible to use one single feed or data source to create product data for a particular country or language. And now you can use multiple files combined with data sent through the shopping API to create your product data, which means that you can use multiple files such as supplemental feeds to add to your product data. So you can add additional files, for example, that have availability information or that have custom labels. You can add those files in Google Merchant Center, and Google Merchant Center will add them to the data for this particular product. There are new feed rules available, which I'm going to show you later in this session, where you can see how you can use these feed rules to fix and optimize data in Google Merchant Center directly. So all the data that you're sending through those data sources and supplemental feeds can be edited in Google Merchant Center with feed rules. I'll also show you troubleshooting tools. That is the new diagnostics tab, which will highlight issues and allow you to figure out what's wrong with the product data a lot easier. And I'll also show you how you can use existing product data to export to new countries. So you can, with a few clicks, use existing product data for additional countries in your Google Merchant Center. So if you look at the first new feature of supplemental feeds that allow you to make updates to your product data by uploading an additional file, you can see that it's possible to provide additional data that will be connected by Google Merchant Center to product data in the primary source based on item ID. This is something to bear in mind when you set up supplemental feeds. Google Merchant Center maps this additional data by item ID. So it's not possible to use item group ID, MPN, or any of these identifiers to map data using supplemental feeds. It needs to be based on item ID. So you'll always need to provide the item ID in the supplemental feed. When is it useful to use supplemental feeds? Obviously, you need to have a list of item IDs. So if you can identify items, then you can use supplemental feeds to add missing data to your products. You can add a new data set or override existing values. For example, you could use a supplemental feed to add custom labeled data that's not available in the main or primary feed. You can reuse this data in the supplemental feeds across multiple primary feeds. So if you have, for example, primary data sources for France and UK, you could use custom labeled data of a single supplemental feed in both the primary data source for the UK and for France. You can update and exclude existing products. So you can use, for example, a supplemental feed to exclude items of a certain brand, or if you have the list of the item IDs, to exclude those from shopping ads. What's important to bear in mind, though, is you cannot add additional products using these files. So they need to exist in a primary feed before you can use supplemental feeds to update product data on this. So you won't be able to use supplemental feeds to add or delete products. You can also use these supplemental feeds to set up inventory updates. So you could use them, for example, to update availability values. So you can override existing availability values, or for price updates. That's all good use cases for supplemental feeds. Feed rules, on the other hand, they modify your data at scale and dynamically based on criteria. So you could use feed rules, for example, to update data on certain conditions when you don't have a list of IDs available. Remember, in a supplemental feed, you would always have to have a list of item IDs. For feed rules, you can use other criteria to manipulate the data in your Google Merchant Center. So you could use conditions, for example, such as only apply a certain change if brand corresponds to a certain value, or if a custom label meets a certain criteria, or the price is within a certain threshold. And you can use these feed rules not only to change product data, but obviously to resolve errors that are highlighted on the diagnostics tab, or make these feed level modifications in GMC directly for a particular country. What's important and what's good to know when you look at feed rules? They are good for simple data transformations, for example, adding a promotion ID, or changing availability values to Google standardized values. You can use rules to apply to feeds individually. It's not possible currently to transfer feed rules. So if you set them up for one feed, you can't copy them and transfer them to a different feed. So you'll have to set those up for each market that you're targeting. A feed will need to be uploaded for the feed rules to be applied. So a feed needs to process for feed rules to apply the changes to new product data. Feed rules can be written on any data source and country. So you can write feed rules on product data that you send through the Content API, that you send through feed files, and so on. So you can combine this for a particular country and then write feed rules on top of that. And of course, feed rules can leverage input from supplemental feeds. So any data that you upload through additional files in Google Merchant Center, you'll be able to use those for feed rules as well. To consider is that feed rules shouldn't be used for very complex transformations. Those are still better to fix at source. Also, to bear in mind is if you use feed rules incorrectly, they can lead to errors. So it's very important to test and check your feed rules before you set them live. I'm also going to show you this in the demo that follows this section. It's a very important point to remember, to always check a preview before you apply the rules on a feed. Also, if you have a particularly large feed that has millions and millions of products in it, and you configure feed rules in Google Merchant Center, it can take up to 1 hour until the rule has fully processed the data. You can use feed rules on data that is sent via API, but you cannot set up feed rules via API. Again, an important point to consider, you always need to log into Google Merchant Center, go to the feed, and set up the feed rule there. It's currently not possible to configure feed rules via API programmatically. Also, rules are currently applied in individual merchant centers. Again, it's not possible to transfer feed rules from feed to feed or configure them at MCA level. You'll always need to go to a sub-account or a merchant center, go to the feeds area, and then set the feed rules up in this section. What are good use cases for feed rules? Feed rules can help you get more products live. So you can use a so-called set to operation, for example, to map invalid attribute names to adhere to the feed spec. For example, if your attribute that holds all your links is called URL, you can simply translate the column name to the Google attribute link, and then get those disapproved items live. You can use an operation called extract to surface missing required data. So for example, if you have color values for apparel missing in the attribute for color, you can ask Google Merchant Center to look at titles or descriptions and look for color values there. And if they're found in the title, Merchant Center will write those color values into the color attribute by using these extract operations. You can then also use something called standardization to modify invalid values and transfer them into a format that's accepted by Google. For example, you can see their gender values. The Google accepted value is male. So if you're using men, you can standardize this value in your feed to a Google accepted value. Also, a good use case for feed rules is optimize existing products. So you can use append and prepend functions to make changes to your titles. For example, you can add brand to the beginning of the title, or you could add color and size values to the end of your titles. You could use tracking strings in URLs. You could find and replace strings to search for keywords and strings that need to be replaced. For example, replace remanufactured with refurbished. Google Merchant Center can make those changes as well. And then in terms of unlocking new opportunities, you can use supplemental feeds to join in promotions data. You can also use feed rules to add in promotion IDs. You can use supplemental feeds to populate custom labels to help you with structuring your campaigns. And you can use rules to exclude certain items from shopping as required. So if you have any items that you would not like to show on shopping and that you would like to exclude on feed level, that's also something that you can use feed rules for. So there's lots of changes that you can make with feed rules. And what I'll do now is I'll jump into a demo section where you can see how to identify items that need changes and how you can use feed rules to address some of these issues. Bear in mind, what I'm going to show you is a test merchant center. So none of these products are actually approved, but you will see how you can use Google Merchant Center to identify item issues and how to use feed rules to address some of these things. So if you have a look here, this is a Google Merchant Center where I've jumped into the diagnostics section in the product area. And if I scroll down, I'll see some of the issues that my test feed currently has. You can see there's updated information here on the diagnostics tab. There's further information that you can look at the Google Merchant Center Help Center articles to find out more about what this error is about. You can then navigate to the right-hand side to actually see some product samples where that show this error. So you can look up the products that have this error and check what the issue is. And if you need to get this fixed, for example, by your IT teams or your feed provider, you'd be able to download a list of these items that are affected by this error and only get a list of items that are affected by this particular issue. So, for example, here, one of the problems in the feed is that I have invalid values for the attribute age group. If you'd like to find out more about age group, you can pull up the Help Center article by clicking on the question mark. And if I then want to see some of these, some of the products that have invalid age group values, I can click on the samples, or here on the right-hand side, I can download all the items that are affected by this error. So if I look at some of the items, I'll be shown item IDs that I can either look up or click through to look at the product data of this particular product. In this case, if I check what's wrong with the age group value, it shows women instead of the accepted value adult. So this is something that I could use feed rules to fix this particular value. And this is also something to bear in mind, that if you navigate to the list view in Google Merchant Center, you'll get an overview of each product that is available in your Google Merchant Center, and you can click through it to see how Google Merchant Center has received its product data and how it's combining the data together. So if I click on a particular product, at the bottom, I can see which attributes make up the final attributes that are used for the shopping ads. So if you scroll down, you'll see there is 2 feeds that create product data for this particular product. And on top, I have the card for the final attributes. These are the ones that are finally used for this. In the feed area, I have what I've been talking to you earlier, where you can see there's a section for primary feeds and supplemental feeds. So you can see the first one is the test feed UK that I've created for United Kingdom. And under supplemental feeds, you can see I've created an inventory update feed that will update availability values of existing product data. So this feed will only update availability. And to check how that's being done on each of the products, I can use list to then scroll to the bottom, find out which of these feeds creates the final attribute. So you can see the supplemental feed has been sending in this information for this particular product ID. The test feed UK, which is my primary data source, has been sending all of the attributes that you can see here. And then the final ones are the ones that you see under final attributes, and this is what's being used in the, or this is what's going to be used in the shopping ads. So this is something where you can look up if several files are creating product data for your products. You'll be able to see that under list and then scrolling to the bottom for each of the items. And if you then look at configuring feed rules, that's what's going to have to happen on the feeds tab, where you'll see your primary feed sources, where you can then add those feed rules that then change the data. To do that, if you remember on the diagnostics tab for my test feed, I've seen errors where the age group values did not meet the Google specifications. So all I need to do, if I would like to fix this error, is click on the primary source on the feeds tab, and then navigate to the rules tab of this particular feed. This will then show me instructions on how to configure feed rules. And you can see here already the rules that I have active for this particular feed. And to fix the error with the age group values, I obviously need to know that I'm changing the attribute age group. And I need to know which of the values I'm using. So the incorrect values that I've been that are available in this test feed are men and women, and these would need to be standardized to adults. So I need to create a rule by clicking the button Create Rule and then selecting the attribute age group. And this gets me into this view. And it's important to understand a few aspects of this view. You have a left-hand side where you'll see data sources and modifications. So these are the two options that you have available on the left-hand side. In the center, you have the panel where you can use conditions and operations to actually change the data. And on the right-hand side here, you'll have a preview section. And I highly recommend to use this. It'll show you immediately what kind of data changes you're making. And in my case, I need to standardize values. So I need to set to my existing age group attribute, so that I have this available for the feed rule to then standardize existing values in here, where I would use modifications here on the left-hand side to then say everything that says women needs to be adult, and everything that is men also needs to be mapped to adult. And you can see the options that I have available here. These are the Google accepted values. So this is what I can configure. So make sure you fill the attribute with the data source that you would like to use, where you know that these values exist, and then you can use standardizations to map this content to a Google accepted value. And although I've not saved anything, simply by clicking OK on the right-hand side, you can now see the incorrect value that's been flagged on the diagnostics tab is now changed to adult. What's also important to keep in mind is if it changes one product successfully, you might want to flick through, and you can use this this preview to go through several of your products to see if the feed rule's been applied correctly, or if you have a particular item ID that you would like to look up, you can use the lookup menu here and simply search for a particular ID as well. So make sure you use that to check whether your feed rules are applied correctly. And if you're happy, you can then save this as a draft, which takes you back to the rules tab of your primary data source. And then you can use test changes to test your draft rule on the complete feed before setting anything live. And then if you're happy with the preview of your feed rule and the test changes button that you have here in your dialog for this particular feed, then you can use apply to set those rules live. So once you hit apply, they'll be with the next feed run, they'll be applied to the feed where you've added those feed rules. You can see you'll always get a summary here as well. You can obviously discard changes, but the flow of the data change is you need to create a rule. You can then use the preview menu on the right-hand side to check whether that's been applied correctly. And then you can use test changes in this overview to make sure really everything looks as you intended. So changes are made to the correct attribute, to the expected number of products. And when you're then happy, you can use apply to save and apply those new or updated rules. If you'd like to change those or delete those, you can hover over the rule in this view, and then delete the rule, and then it will no longer make any changes to it. Then, if you're then happy with looking at the diagnostics tab, looking at all the messages that you find there, where you understood from the Help Center articles on how to fix these errors that are flagged on the diagnostics tab, you might want to use feed rules, for example, for promotions, or optimizing data, or changing custom labels. And you can do that as well. So if you're looking at merchant promotions, these are promotions, for example, where you can add to shopping ads that shoppers might be getting a buy one, get one free deal, or free shipping for a certain period of time. And if you know merchant promotions, you'll need to apply a merchant promotion ID to the products where this promotion should apply. And you can use supplemental feeds to create a feed. If you know all the product IDs, you can create a supplemental feed that has these promotion IDs via this dialog, or you can use feed rules to create a promotion ID for a certain set of products dynamically. For example, for this test feed, I'd like to set up a promotion ID for all the products of a certain brand. So I have a brand one where I'd like to apply a certain promotion ID, but I'd like to only apply this to this particular brand, and I would only like to apply this promotion after a certain price threshold. Again, I'd have to create the feed rule that applies this promotion ID by clicking Create Rule, and then selecting the attribute Promotion ID. And then I'd have to set my promotion ID to a particular value that I've chosen for my promotion. In this case, I'm choosing 10% off, which is what I've set up in my promotion, in my merchant promotion menu. But I would only like to set this up for a particular brand. So I'll need to use conditions to then say, I only want to apply this if the brand matches a certain criteria, in my case, brand one. And also not only of this particular brand, but I'd also like to apply this to a sale price that is higher than £200. So you can see you have, for these kinds of conditions, you have all kinds of operators that you can use to specify to Google Merchant Center what you would like to use and where the promotion ID should be applied and where it shouldn't be applied. And then I can simply say for a sale price greater than 200, I would like to set this promotion ID. So I've set up conditions where the promotion ID should be set to 10% off if the brand is brand one and the sale price is higher than £200. And I can already see from the preview here on the right-hand side, this particular product doesn't fall into this category. So it's not getting any changes. But now that I've scrolled forward to a product where this applies, I can see the promotion ID is set to 10% off in this instant preview. So it's a very handy tool on the right-hand side to make sure that your feed rules set up correctly. Again, if you have a particular product where you know that a feed rule should apply, it's also good practice to have that ready and then search for this particular ID where this should apply by clicking on the menu up here. And once I'm happy that the promotion ID is going to be filled correctly, I can use Save Draft to actually save this feed rule. And then again, as shown previously, I can use test changes to run a full test on the whole feed to make sure that the promotion ID is applied correctly. And then once I'm happy with that, I can click Apply to then make sure that all the feed rules are applied correctly. What's also possible for feed rules is, or to do with feed rules, is optimizing product data such as titles. And if you'd like to do that, again, you'd have to navigate to the Rules tab of your feed where you would like to do this, hit Create Rule for Title, and then make the title modifications. In my test feed, I have a very basic title structure. So I'd like to use feed rules to add brand, color, and size values to the title. And there's options that you have for doing this. You can simply use set rules to then use the existing title that you have. And then, for example, use the modifications to prepend a word or a phrase, or in my case, a brand. So I can use this to then say prepend a certain value. Once I add this, I can continue to add modifications on the left-hand side, or I can use this to create a string of attributes that should make up my titles. For example, it should start with, the title should start with brand. Then what I would like to do is then add in the original title, so the actual product of product description that I have in the feed. And then, as I said, what I would like to do is I would like to add color values. So I can do this as well by simply adding in color and anything else that make up my title attribute. So once I've done this and click OK, you can see an instant preview where this title that said lounge overall before is now changed to brand to lounge overall, has the color value and the size value. So you can click through that to see additional examples on how this feed rule combined several attributes into a new title structure. As with all of the other rules that you've seen before, this can also be combined with conditions. So you could potentially only make these changes for a certain brand where you know you don't have the best titles, or for a certain product type. All this is possible by using conditions for the data sources that make up the attribute and for modifications that work on the attribute itself. Again, if you're happy with your instant preview here on the right-hand side, then you can save a draft for this. Again, use test changes to run your title changes that you can see here below, to test that against all the products in the feed, and then clicking apply would set those rules live as well. Then we talked about the different options that you have available when it comes to feed rules, that you can use them to standardize your product data. You can use them to optimize, as you've seen in the title rule that I've just created. And you can also use them to, for example, fill custom labels based on certain criteria. If you would like to do that, again, it's possible to use supplemental feeds and uploading custom labels for your products. All a file would need to contain is the item ID. Again, very important to remember this, that any supplemental feed that you create for your products needs to contain the item ID in a column called ID, and then have the attribute that you would like to add in a second column. For example, custom label values. You label the next column as custom label 0 and then upload a supplemental feed. Or you can use feed rules to populate custom labels dynamically. For example, what I would like to do for my test feed is populate the last node of the product type into a custom label, and I'm going to use custom label 0 to then add in the last node of the product type. To do this, I would need to know, or I need to know how my product type is structured. And I know that by looking at the file, or if you're unsure, you can always go to the list view and check a particular product to find out how your product type is structured. So I can see here the nodes are separated by this little arrow here, and all I want is the word socks in my custom label. So I don't want the full product type in my custom label. I only want the last node to help me structure my campaigns. And this is something that I can do with feed rules by clicking again on the feed, navigating to the rules tab, creating a rule, in my case now for a custom label. Always important to choose the attribute where you want to make changes to first. So I'm going to choose custom label 0 for this. Now I want this custom label 0 to be filled by my product type. I know my product type is available in my main feed, but I don't want to keep all of the product type. I only want the last node. So I only wanted to say, in this example here on the right-hand side, it should only say loungewear. It shouldn't keep the whole string. So what I can do is I can use modifications and use advanced operators to help me make this change. And I can use split and choose to split the product type that I've added into the custom label. And I know I need to select this one. And I only want to keep the last one. So I'm selecting the last one here from the drop-down. I click OK. And then in my instant preview, I can see that Google Merchant Center has filled my custom label 0 with the product type. I've then used modifications to split it and only use the last node of the product type to be added to the custom label. And I can see now that the custom label is for this particular product only filled with loungewear. If I click through the next product, it's the same one. And here I'll see I only have the value socks in the custom label 0 in this example. Again, it's doing what I intend to do. Then I can use, again, my the button test changes to see how my draft rules are applied to my product data here in my Google Merchant Center. Once I'm happy, I'll click apply. This will then, with the next feed processing, apply all the feed rules that I've configured and that I've applied to my product data. And then this should resolve the errors on the diagnostics tab for age group. It'll fix or it'll add my custom label data, my promotion ID data, and it'll fix my title structure. So these are all the changes that I've added to my test feed, and those would get applied once I've run the test. In the interest of time, I'm going to apply them now so that you can see how these get applied immediately. So you can see this is how it would look if there's no active draft open and all the rules are applied. And this would now be run on the next feed processing of my main UK feed. Once that's done, I can also see changes made by feed rules. Again, if I navigate to the list view, I can then click on a particular product and then scroll to the bottom of this particular product to see the changes that have been made by feed rules. And if there are any problems, or you don't see what you expect, then you can look at correcting your feed rules by going back to the Feeds tab and the Rules tab and editing the rules accordingly. But as said in the presentation, make sure you use feed rules for use cases that are good for feed rules to be used. Make sure you use the preview function, so the instant preview and the test changes before you apply them. Use the diagnostics tab in Google Merchant Center to find out which ones need fixing to get additional products live, and make sure that you look at some of the important attributes like G10, brand, price, sale price, when you consider making optimizations to your product data. And this would be all from me today. I hope this was useful to you. If you have any questions, do not hesitate to reach out to your Google account manager if you have any further questions. And I hope you have a nice day. Thank you.